Good morning. We are presenting on attachment and behavior challenges resulting from difficulties in early attachment relationships. I am Kyla Meyerson and I'm presenting with my colleague Jaimee Taitz. We are both intern clinical psychologists at Tara. We will start off by discussing the importance of an early attachment relationship and how if there are complications in early attachment relationships, these patterns may repeat themselves in other relationships. These complications might be separations from primary caregivers, caregivers struggling due to their own difficulties, or general parental difficulties. The aim of today's seminar is to help care workers make sense of current behavioral difficulties in light of these experiences. We imagine that in placements, children may behave in an incongruent manner with current caregiving strategies and the current level of safety in the home. We want to think together about what might be going on for the child when they act out in this way.
Attachment is a special emotional relationship between the child and the caregiver. This involves the provision of safety and the provision of comfort from the caregiver. There are many reasons why attachment in a child's early years is important. We will introduce a few of the reasons in this slide. The attachment relationship underpins emotional and psychological development. Through the experience of soothing by a primary caregiver, the child later learns to self-soothe. A child is not born knowing what feelings are or how to manage them. A caregiver in an attachment relationship may then reflect a child's feelings back to them. The caregiver may say, "You feel angry." This helps the child to learn about their feelings. The caregiver may also help the child to calm down when they are angry. Through modeling of this by the caregiver in the attachment relationship, the child learns skills of self-soothing. However, when it is difficult for the caregiver to provide soothing to this child, the child may struggle to know what they are feeling and how to manage the feelings. Rather, any feelings, small or large, may feel overwhelming, unmanageable, and difficult to make sense of. This may play out in a child crying, tantruming, or shouting. We also develop a sense of self through our relationship with other people. Through the caregiver's mirroring and reflecting, the child learns to make sense of themselves. This helps them to form a sense of identity and to feel a sense of confidence and security in who they are. From being in a relationship with their early attachment figure, children learn how to relate to other people and to develop interpersonal skills. The features of this early relationship may be repeated in other relationships, such as with current caregivers, peers, teachers, or even later romantic partners. Here we can see a picture of two different brains. On the left is a child who has had a more secure attachment experience. The brighter colors indicate that the different parts of their brain are active and well developed, resulting from an attentive and present caregiver. On the right is a brain of a child who may have suffered from deprivation or abuse. This child's brain may be less developed as a result of lack of stimulation.
Early attachment styles are established in childhood through the infant-caregiver relationship. Different caregiving strategies predict different types of attachment styles. This slide is helpful to keep on hand when trying to make sense of different attachment styles and different forms of behaviors. In the next few slides, we will discuss the 4 different attachment styles in detail. They are secure attachments. There are 2 types of insecure attachment, insecure ambivalent and insecure avoidance, and then the 4th style is disorganized attachment. Infants have an innate tendency to rely on their caregivers for safety. When there is a good enough environment and good enough caregiving, the child attaches securely. The child will learn to become visibly upset when they are in distress. They will seek comfort from their parent or caregiver when in distress, and they will feel soothed by their caregiver when their caregiver provides for their needs.
When there hasn't been good enough environmental provisions, the child learns that they cannot trust that their needs will be always met. This may lead to insecure ambivalent attachment. As a result, when in distress, they have mixed feelings of anger towards their caregivers for not providing for them, but desperation for their comfort. This may play out in them seeking but resisting reassurance from their caregiver. On the surface, what we see is a child passively rejecting the caregiver by refusing comfort or openly displaying aggression towards the caregiver. As a result, we might think that they don't want comfort or reassurance, but deep down they are hoping for the safety and security to be provided. Children who attach in an insecure, avoidant manner present as being independent and managing on their own. On the surface, they present as not needing their caregiver, but this is a result of learning to cope on their own because they believe others are unreliable and unresponsive.
The fourth attachment pattern that we're going to discuss is disorganized attachment. These children show a lack of clear attachment behavior. These children are described as displaying dazed behavior, sometimes either seeming confused or apprehensive in the presence of a caregiver. This results often from a caregiver who responds to a child in a frightening or frightened way. This may occur when children have been abused or neglected. We are going to expand on this attachment style in the next few slides, as we believe that this may be the most common attachment pattern seen in children's homes. When early attachment patterns are perceived as dangerous by the child, as we have just described, it causes an internal struggle between the yearning to be close and the drive to be safe. Do I run towards my attachment figure to seek closeness, or do I run away from my caregiver to seek safety? Caregivers who act as figures of both fear and reassurance to a child contribute to a disorganized style of attachment. Because the child feels frightened and comforted by the same parents, deep confusion results. Another way we can understand how disorganized attachment develops is through the process of protest, despair, and detachment. At first, when a child is distressed, we imagine that a child would protest and cry to try and have their needs met. But if nobody responds to them, the child eventually enters into a phase of despair and hopelessness, as they've learned that nobody is available to provide for their needs. If this continues to occur and the child's needs are continuously not met, the child may enter into the third phase of detachment. This is what we see in a disorganized attachment, where a child appears detached from the environment or reality or their relationships. On the surface, it may appear that this child is now well adjusting to the home or to the environment, as they're no longer crying or appearing difficult. But actually, this may be the most problematic, as the child is learning to disconnect from their reality and their environments in order to cope, because they have learned that nobody is there to meet their needs.
This slide shows different forms of behaviors and difficulties that result from attachment difficulties. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, the behavior might not at first glance make sense with the current circumstances. For example, a child may act out and display anger and aggression, even though the current environment is safe, secure, and providing for their needs. That is why we are going to try and think about how the behavior has multiple layers to it and may be communicating something beyond what we see. A child who is easily dysregulated by crying, shouting, tantruming, fighting may appear to be naughty or ungrateful. However, there might have been a lack of soothing from caregivers in their early years, resulting in their own difficulty self-regulating and self-soothing. Feelings might be unmanageable and they become very big and explosive, leading to outbursts or other difficult behaviors. Another way that behavior might present in a certain way, but actually underneath there might be a different communication, is through stealing and destruction. Stealing, for instance, may seem like the child is trying to grab an extra chocolate bar from the cupboard or an extra pencil from the stationery box. However, what might be actually happening is that the child is just trying to seek some sort of love or affection or attention that they once lost, that might have occurred in their very early years when they separated from their primary caregivers. The second part is destruction, and often we can see that children act out by destroying property or breaking things and throwing things. This behavior might seem very aggressive and very destructive. However, what might be underneath this behavior is that they might be compelling the environment to be more attentive to them and to provide for them in a way that they might not have had their needs provided for. And so actually they're communicating something that is really painful. A different type of attachment behavior may present itself in relationship difficulties. This may be in all relationships, either with the caregivers, their peers, their teachers, and even sometimes with the kids in the home. On the surface, it might seem a certain way, but actually, as we've said before, there's something underneath. And so, for example, if a child appears to be attention-seeking, they may just be seeking connection. This might not seem like they are considering what you are doing or what their friends might be doing, and they might seem like they are trying to seek as much as they can, but actually their needs haven't been met in the past when they were with their primary caregivers. And so they needed some sort of security and some sort of attention when they needed their needs to be met. So they might feel that by acting out and acting in extravagant ways to seek attention is actually for them to seek a connection and so to get their needs met. Attachment behaviors can also be seen in relationship difficulties. These difficulties can be with a variety of interpersonal relationships. On the surface, a child who appears to be attention-seeking, for example, may actually just be seeking connection. This might not seem that they are considering that you are doing your best or that you are attending to many of their primary needs, but they actually haven't had their needs met in the past, and so they feel like if they do need some sort of connection, they might act out, and this might be in very extravagant ways. And sometimes they're just trying to communicate something, but instead of looking at just the acting out, it's important to really understand that maybe their needs weren't respected in the past, and that they need some more caring, and there needs to be some. I feel like I'm teaching. Attachment difficulties may also present in relationships. On the surface, a child who appears attention-seeking may just be seeking connection. The child may appear to be demanding and not considerate of their caregiver who is actually trying their best. In the past, these children's needs may not have been met by their primary caregivers, and as a result, these children may have learned to adopt strategies of extravagance or being extremely demanding to get their needs met. These children might feel like they have to act out to get those needs met. As we mentioned before, children may repeat early attachment patterns in other relationships. Children may repeat abuse from home on others in the form of bullying. When a child has not had an available caregiver to teach them about their emotions and the emotions of others, they may not have had sufficient experience to develop any sort of empathy for others. These children may exhibit higher levels of aggression and bullying towards others without showing an awareness of insight that their behaviors may be hurting the others. Because they haven't had enough experiences of mirroring from their primary caregiver, they may have not developed a strong enough self-esteem. They then may feel bad about themselves. They have experiences of feeling insecure and not good enough in their attachment relationships. To protect these fragile feelings, they put up a strong exterior to ensure that they can protect themselves. So we see that this doesn't only happen with peers, but also in relationships with authority. Most children's attachment difficulties can go to great lengths to remain in control and to avoid feeling helpless. They are often disobedient, defiant, and argumentative as a way to maintain control.
In the context of learning in school, challenges in the attachment relationship may also be seen in the form of learning difficulties, the child's attitude toward learning, and their relationships with the teachers and classroom. With regards to learning difficulties, attachment is crucial in one's ability to learn. As we mentioned previously, attachment is the foundation of emotional regulation. Emotional regulation enables children to cope with upsets and difficulties. Learning involves not knowing, which can be challenging to tolerate. When a child struggles to emotionally regulate, then it is likely to be difficult to tolerate the challenge of learning. Poor concentration may also result from attachment difficulties. The child may be scanning for danger, preoccupied with worries, or lost in a flashback of a previous abuse. This may make it difficult for a child to concentrate and focus on the task at hand. A child's attitude towards learning may also be shaped by the attachment relationship. For example, a child who appears to be lazy when it is time to study may actually be scared to ask for help. If a child didn't have a caregiver who attentively provided for their needs, it may be difficult for them to trust that a teacher or caregiver may be able to provide for their needs when doing homework. These children may avoid the work rather than asking for help. As we mentioned earlier, the type of a relationship that the child has with their primary caregiver may be repeated in other relationships, like with a teacher. A child with a disorganized attachment, for example, may see their caregiver as frightening, and this may result in them later seeing their teacher as frightening too. When distressed, these children may flee from the classroom or the teacher rather than approaching the teacher for comfort and support. This child may also create chaos in the classroom. Their inside feelings of being overwhelmed may be acted out in the class rather than communicated in a calm and clear way. These children may feel more familiar with a chaotic class environment than a safe and calm atmosphere. This slide shows two diagnosable disorders resulting from difficulties in early attachment relationships. Both these disorders can result from changes in primary caregivers that limit the child's opportunity to form stable and secure relationships with primary caregivers. In the reactive attachment disorder, counter to what we expect from a child to seek comfort from their caregiver when distressed, these children rarely seek or respond to comfort when distressed because they've learned to either try and switch off their needs or to push away their needs, as they've learned that there hasn't been anyone to provide for their needs in the past. In disinhibited social engagement disorder, children often seek comfort from any person that they might find, and this may result from children trying to get as much as they can from anyone because they haven't experienced having their needs met in the past.
Research has shown that these attachment patterns can persist into adulthood and impact the way people form relationships and establish a sense of self later in life. This is something that you can definitely look at in your own time, but we're just trying to point out that without intervention, sometimes these patterns can persist and they remain stable throughout adulthood.
Although research shows that attachment styles can persist into adulthood, a new experience with a different caregiver and different adults and professionals are opportunities to shift ways of viewing the self and other people. It is also a new experience to develop different skills such as emotional regulation. Our colleague Natalie will be presenting later on different caregiving and parenting strategies that can provide support in making these shifts and managing these challenging behaviors when they do occur.
Thank you so much for attending and listening to the seminar, and we really hope that it has been helpful. I know that our colleague will be present for the Q&A later if you do have any questions.